Okay, let's get started. Today's going to be really easy and semi-fun, I think, because you're not really learning anything new. You're just figuring out what you've learned. Because we're going to go over the midterm and what you need to do to prepare for it. So we are technically in week 8. I'm going to actually give you HTML and some more preferences examples. There were a couple of lingering examples that I forgot to show you back in the day. So I kind of went through everything to make sure I gave you all the material so you guys are well prepared for the midterm. So we'll go over those examples. But first, I want to go over this midterm exam. And so the midterm exam review video that I'm recording right now is going to show up right here. It's not visible to you guys yet, but it will be at the end of this class. That's what you're going to use, hopefully, to study. There's a sheet here, midterm review sheet, which is this one here that I'm going to go over. And rather than just reading you what's on here, I'm actually going to tell you what's in these categories, what kind of sample questions they are, because it's really hard to put all the details in a text format like that. If you already have the Respondus web browser, here it is here, actually, let me do it this way. There we go. If you already have the Respondus web browser, don't download it again. I hear the newer ones are kind of buggy. You have an older one and keep it. Don't fix it. If you don't have one and you're new to CSU Bay, then you want to download the browser. You have to download the browser because you have to take the exam on the browser. If you haven't done this before, you download the Respondus browser, you open it up, no webcam is required, just the browser. The browser prevents internet access outside of the Canvas, but in Google searching and stuff like that. It's a closed book, closed notes exam. If you do try to navigate on the internet outside of the browser, I think it locks or something bad happens. So don't do that. But yeah, you'll need that browser. And the exam is timed. The exam has a 60-minute or 1 hour time to it. And you have 30 multiple choice true false questions. So you have 2 minutes a question, which is plenty of time to think and stuff. They are of the true false multiple choice kind of variety, no code writing. I don't even have you looking at code. So there's nothing. So you don't have to worry about your Java skills or your Kotlin skills. We haven't even talked about Kotlin yet, so that's good. So it's all about Android and Android features. So it's 1 hour long. Once you start it, you have to finish it in a single sitting. So make sure you have at least an hour available when you do it. I'm going to go down to the bottom. Well, actually, before I do that, there's one note I put down here that I probably should put up here, which was the exam covers everything through week 7. So week 7 of the class is this week here, which was last week. Well, technically week 8, which is this week. But there's nothing on content providers. So let me go through the content for you. So the number on the left are the number of questions, and the category is on the right. So I want to do is just kind of explain the categories for you because it doesn't really say anything to say Android Studio. Like, what does that mean? I'm not going to ask you like IDE questions, but it is based on Android Studio. So if I open up Android Studio, which probably should have done, so there we go. And let's go into this one. Actually, let's go into this save switch states. So I want to show you that example today. If you've done assignment number 1, you can answer the 3 Android Studio questions. It's because it's based on the assignments that you've done. We don't have a textbook for this course, if you haven't figured that out, but we do have a lot of examples and we have a lot of PDF and PowerPoint files, and I'm going to draw your attention to some of them that are important that you probably want to look at. But let's talk about these Android Studio questions. So Android Studio has a couple of different features. For example, if you did assignment number 1, you had to create an emulator. So there's questions about device manager and setting up an emulator. They're very basic questions, very easy questions, actually. I'm expecting everyone to get those correct. And if you've created an emulator, you will know what the question's asking about. So it's a matter of if you've seen it before. Where you're going to miss these questions is if you've never created an Android Studio project. That's going to be a problem. For example, things about Android Studio, the Gradle scripts, I'm not asking you any particular questions about Gradle or Gradle scripts. Just know that the Gradle is the compiler, and it's an online compiler, so it's not actually downloaded here. That is why when you compile a program to run it, it takes so long. It's because it's compiling it online. I think that's a really stupid way of doing it, but it keeps it up to date and it's more efficient that way because there's a lot of libraries that go into the compilation process. So, all right, what else do we have about Android Studio? Well, we have things like the manifest, which is the configuration file for the project. I'm also doing a little bit of review today as well, just kind of put things in perspective. We have the ability to write Java and Kotlin. While there's no questions about Java or Kotlin, like programming questions, you'd probably want to have it. Those are the two languages. We know that the UI is created in XML, and we know that we have a resource folder where we put all of the UI components. This XML actually gets compiled. Everything that's in the resource folder turns into r.java, and that's the job of Gradle. So Gradle turns that resource folder into Java. So there's some third-party tools out there. You don't need to know anything about them, but they do pretty much the same thing. And then you just copy in an r.java, which is why it's kind of a module that way. But you don't really need to know that either. So I'll just stick to what you need to know. So layouts. In here, we also have, well, in the exam, there's going to be a separate category for this resource folder. So I'm not going to cover that right now. We do have different views in here. I'm not going to ask you or trip you up on the names of these different things or any of the debugging tools either. So it's more very basic questions. Like, what is the interface to, here, let me give you an example question. The interface file to the common activity is held in which file in Android Studio? And one of them would be like, or which folder in Android Studio? And you would say like, it's in the layout folder. That's a subfolder of the resource folder. Oh yes, simple stuff like that. So like, it's basically testing to see if you've actually used Android Studio yet. Very basic questions, not anything to be concerned about. So the next category, 4 questions. So these are like really easy 7 questions, by the way. Nothing too hard. So number 4, excuse me, 4 questions on the second item here, Android features. So we have features that are part of the system versus other mobile app systems. For example, Android runs a Java version. It's running on an Android kernel, which is actually a Linux kernel. Nothing about the kernel stuff either. But for example, we have intents. That's an Android feature. The use of intents to go from one activity to another, like what you did in assignment number 1. And the assignment, the exam actually covers assignments 1, 2, and 3. So just so you know, we have adapters. We have XML. We have layouts. We have widgets. Widgets are the word being used to describe these guys here in the palette. These are called widgets. So we have different types of widgets. We have the ability to create a service, which is a background process. We have broadcast receivers, which I'm going to actually talk about this week. Content providers, which you don't have any questions about that, but that's the content provider is the central repository of all of the data that's kept on the phone. And so we're going to see that after the midterm, actually, we'll see some of that. But it's features of Android. Android runs in like a siloed environment, and it has its own app space. We saw it in the device explorer, where we could see the path and then we could see the app itself. I don't ask you anything about the Explorer, device to Explorer, but it's a good tool to kind of look to see what's actually on the device. But features are going to be things that you can do in Android Studio versus things about the IDE. So yeah, the ability to create menus. Menus are in here. The values folder. We have a string.xml file that keeps track of all of the common strings entered in an Android app. We have colors, we have themes, we have styles. I don't ask you anything specifically about themes and styles because we really didn't cover it. And there's nothing on the Material 3 design either. But that would be in that category. And the category I'm talking about is the Android features. Stop me as I go along if you have a specific question about anything I'm talking about. Or actually, after the class is over and you think about all this stuff, if you come up with a question, you can actually email me as well. So let's see. So I'm just going to move ahead to the next one. So we're going to find like reading material about all this stuff. In the course materials, I go back up to week 1. There's a few things that are in here that I did not go over. However, I put them in here because they're like the quote unquote reading materials. So for example, the activity life cycle. So if I open that guy up, take a look at him, we've got, oh, actually, you know what? I can do it this way. I think I have that one downloaded. I think it's in my way. Get out of my way. Go back to here. There we go. Here we go. So this particular one that's in week 1 is called the activity life cycle. It goes through, these would be features of the Android system. These are the 5 primary components. And these are things like activities, intents, services. That's what that is referring to. So this is a very good lecture to review prior to taking the midterm. Because you'll find a lot of the textbook kind of stuff in here. And then there's a definition about what is a content provider and what is a broadcast receiver. And it kind of goes through the anatomy. And it also talks about this thing called the activity stack that I actually did lecture on. And so just to review this concept as well, this would be part of the Android features category, the prior one, not the architecture, but it kind of similar. So every time you open up an activity, the first time you open it, it gets loaded up into memory. And then you go maybe use an intent to go to another activity. The first activity doesn't get taken out of memory. It gets put on this activity stack and it gets pushed down. We put the next one on top of it and on top of it. And so it might be, you might find a question about the activity stack or something. Typical game architecture is in here. And then we have this activity life cycle. You're going to want to look at this guy. I don't memorize all of the callback methods. However, like something like on create, you got to know about that one. It's a no-brainer. It's like equivalent to main in the C class. But you know, but you want to know about the cycle and how it works, the life cycle. So the on start, the on resume, then the app is running. There was a demo on this life cycle as well that showed you log messages. I didn't put any questions about the log, so you don't have to worry about the system log. So let's see. Go back to my, so there's a question about the architecture. And the architecture, I believe, is in Android intro. It's right here. So I'm on this one here, Android architecture, this one little question, and I'm going to go over that architecture in a few minutes. And I believe this one is also in, I downloaded it the other day. It is also in here somewhere. You can also go to developer.android.com and find the same one. Thought it was in week 1 though. Well, I downloaded it from there. It is called, probably could search on it. It's called Android Intro. If you can't find something, you can also send me a message. I can send you the file, but it should be in. I downloaded it from there yesterday. So let's talk about the architecture. This is a great way for me to fill in the blanks of what I may or may not have given you guys yet. It's a layered architecture, much different than the iOS environment. iOS does not work in a layered. iOS is actually dual mode. Don't need to know that either. But anyway, but Android, we have the application level that's on the top. This is where we're creating apps right now. It's on the application level. Underneath that is the framework. And so these are the features that I've been talking about, like content providers, activity manager, which is what we've been using when creating an activity, the window manager for the motifs and stuff, for the GUI, the view system. Then we're going to hit next week, we're going to hit location manager and notification manager to send out notifications. The framework level is really the nuts and bolts of the actual operating system. It has all of everything that we're programming with. And so the application level communicates directly to the application framework level. Very similar to how the OSI model works in networking, if you're familiar with that. It's a very similar model. So underneath that framework, we've got our libraries. Our libraries are based on, and we're going to see SQLite actually pretty soon. We've got the WebKit that we've looked at, the web view, media framework with the media, things like the media manager, the media player. Yeah, some of the stuff we, are kind of this core libraries that are Linux based. So, and then in here we have a Delvik kernel. So it's a Delvik virtual machine, very similar to the JVM, but this is a DVM. And so each app that runs in the application level has its own instance of the runtime. And so that's why we can't share data between each one of them, which is different than iOS actually. So we have the core libraries and we have the Delvik kernel that's in there. And then underneath that, on the lowest level, is you have the Linux kernel. That Linux kernel is just a regular old, very similar to Ubuntu, actually. It's embedded Linux, though, where we're going to have the drivers, the camera drivers, the flash drivers, power management. We're going to actually look at some of these drivers when we start looking at the hardware components way after the midterm. But so there's one question about this architecture. It's a no-brainer. So if you look at this as a study, you don't have to memorize everything on it, but just kind of get a feel for, we have applications and we have the frameworks underneath it, then we have the libraries, and we have a runtime. It's a very simple, not too many levels, but something to look at if you want to get an A on this exam. So preparing you to get an A on this exam. So all right, so go back to my list. This should be very fresh in your mind. 2 questions on shared preferences and databases. It's actually not really a database question. It's I haven't really covered databases yet. In fact, probably we'll do it tomorrow, and then you guys will be watching the recording of it. But the shared preferences, how to create shared preferences, which is part of assignment number 4, I believe. I've shown you several examples. Actually, I'm going to show you another example today as well that I left out. But it's fairly simple. Making an instance of the editor, making an instance to copy into it. Take a look at the syntax, review that. You won't see the syntax, but you'll be asked a question about it. So it's, I don't give you the syntax or anything so that you can sort of, if you've seen it before, if you've worked with shared preferences before, maybe you haven't yet because maybe you haven't done the assignments yet. Great way of studying for the exam is to start working on those assignments if you haven't done them yet. So, but the 2 questions are also in this category. I did not write it down specifically, but I also showed you a couple of things about saving data into text files, public and private, if you remember that example. So it's really, one of the questions is really about the ability. So know that Android can save text files. Shared preferences is actually a file. It's an XML file, and it's a map. So it's a regular Java map that's actually in an XML format that uses a key value combination. So you create a key, you put values, and you can have multiple values for a single key. but it's very similar to like the Python, the Java map environment. And so it's in an XML file. That file is actually not public, even though you have to put private on everything. It's private by default because it's where it's stored. Shared preferences are stored with the app in the app data that's in the main memory. It's not stored on the SD card and it's not stored in a public folder. It's private. So if you want it to have public data, then you can use a regular standard Java IO or the Android saving, opening, and closing file libraries and put them anywhere you want. You can put them in the downloads folder. You can put them in a special folder that you create yourself. It could be on the SD card. So it can be anywhere you want. So there is a data. Did not download that one. Let me go back here. There is a study sheet. I guess I should have figured out where they were. Well, these all came. I downloaded them from here yesterday. Oh, here's the Android intro, by the way. This is the one I just showed you that had the layered architecture on it. So that was actually in week 2. So if you go through and just review the materials, you'll be in good shape. When it comes to those shared preferences, there was a intense user. I thought I downloaded it. This one might be it. Yep, here it is. There's a good old PDF file that's in the shared preferences folder called files and preferences. Those 3 questions come out of this PDF. So, you know, so you want to know like the internal, external stuff, resource, embedded files. It'll go through everything. I didn't go through the entire PowerPoint or PDF. I stopped, I think, on slide 10. Stopped right here. The rest of it, you can go through on your own. I showed you an example instead, but if you want a little bit more information, kind of set your comfort zone, this is a good resource for that. There's a little bit of reading in here, stuff like that. It's more of a textbook versus anything else. So this one here, the files and preferences, is going to be a good one for you. All right. And okay, I thought there were 3 questions. There's only 2 questions out of there. So. One question is services. That one, if you go into the services example, and that's going to be in the, let's see, recycler view. I don't want to go through the whole thing. I downloaded it already. Let me just open it up from the download. Oh, here it is. Services, services, services. This is a pretty small PDF file. It's also in the course materials. It's called services.pdf. It's going to show you the differences between the bounded and the unbounded service. It's one small question on the services concept. So we have 2 varieties of services. One of us the bounded, the other one's the unbounded. The binding can occur with almost any element. So it's not just an activity that you bind the service to. You can bind it to another service. You can bind it to a notification or anything you want, actually, any of the legal components. The life cycle of the service you're going to want to be familiar with as well. The basic life cycles, for example, we have the on create. We still have an on create, on start, but the binded one has an on bind, of course, on unbind, on destroy. So we have a few life cycle methods. I would look at the start and I'd look at the end of the life cycle because I don't ever ask any questions about the middle because that's pretty easy. The pause or the unpause or the stop or started. So yeah, the on destroy and you're going to see a multiple choice question. And it's going to say something like, let me say, I purposely didn't look at the exam, so I'm not going to repeat any questions, but I'm going to make one up on the top of my head here and say that which of the following are life cycle callback? These are callback methods, by the way. Life cycle callback methods of a service, A, B, or C. And then A might say uncreate, unbind, on something, on destroy, which would probably be the right answer. And then the other one's going to be unexit or on start, on main, on. So if you've looked at it before, you'll know the naming. It'll come back. It's pretty easy. You'll recall it easily. But I wouldn't memorize all of the life cycles. And so this one is in the services. And then the activity life cycle is in a couple of different places. I put it actually in a separate file as well as in this file. So there's like two copies of it. They're the same copy. Because further down the list here, you have 4 questions on the activity and services life cycle. That's what I'm talking about. I can kind of skip ahead because I had those opened. So, but those PDFs, the services.pdf and the activity lifecycle PDF, those 4 questions come out of there. So, and also out of the projects that we've done too. So one question on the basic concept of the services, and it's usually, the question will be conceptual based, so like on a capability of a service, like what kind of service, what, the definition or the capability of it, feature of the service. 3 questions on the activity concept. Hey, like, what is an activity? You want to know about the life cycle, but that's in the next one. All you probably should know, and maybe I don't know if I've told you yet, but all apps have at least one activity. Yeah, unless it's if the app has a user interface, it has at least one activity. You can't make one with a user interface that doesn't have one. Some apps are services or broadcast receivers or notification kind of apps that may not necessarily have an activity, but they don't have a user interface either. So, because you can create an app that's just a service. In fact, we have several of them on the Android phone, the telephony service, the SMS service. Something has to work with the hardware to make the phone actually work. So those are technically apps that are at the application level, but they don't have a UI to them. Well, and then we have this thing called a broadcast receiver, but there's no questions on broadcast receivers, no questions on notifications, no questions on SMS, phone dialer, or other related concepts. I didn't trick you up with the implicit intents, so you don't have to worry about that. This exam, though, is just to week 7. The final exam will be accumulative. So whatever I didn't ask you on the midterm, you might see on the final. So whatever time you invest in looking at the materials at this point is going to be value added for when you start studying for the final. So what ends up happening is we have a lot of students who will overstudy for this exam because, well, if, in all honesty, there's a lot of features here. There's a lot of stuff. And it's like, well, so the exam's made kind of easier to, and it's more of an identification kind of thing. Do I identify, can I, if I see an onCreate method, do I know what that means? Kind of thing. And it's really just a kind of a checkpoint to see if you've dug into the system and if you've created an app yet. So everybody who usually shows, like you guys, will all get an A on it. I mean, it's like guaranteed because, I can't guarantee it, but statistically likelihood, because looks like you've been paying attention, you come to class, the person who hasn't opened up Android Studio yet, or maybe hasn't even got it installed yet, they're not going to pass the test. So that's kind of like what I'm doing here. And yeah, you'd think they're paying good money to go to school. You'd think that everybody would have at least have Android Studio installed. Usually right after the spring break, I get all these people coming to me with their computers going, I can't get Android Studio installed. And I'm like, after the spring break, that's going to happen. I'm going to be like, oh my God, are you serious? Like, no, that's why you got like a D on the midterm. But if you've looked at Android Studio and you've listened to me at least half of the lectures, you'll ace the thing. It's not hard. And also some of the questions, another kind of trick here, not a trick, but some of the people will try to learn by exam taking. So I'm talking about that other group that hasn't even installed Android Studio yet. They'll take a look at some of the questions and they'll go, oh, because the question will say, a intent is used to blah, 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 and which one of the following is part of the intent purpose or something like that? And then you'll see, they'll use that and then they'll go down on then they'll see another question that'll say, the intent, and then they'll look at what they've learned from that question and they'll apply it to this question and they'll get it wrong because I'll be talking about an explicit or an implicit intent. It would be the wrong kind of intent. That's usually what happens as well. So we have one question on intents down here, by the way. So just know we have implicit and explicit intents, and I actually have a lecture PDF file that you can look at if you want some more information on that. I'll get there in a second. All right, so we have 3 activity concepts. What can an activity do? Starting one activity from another activity using an intent. Let's see what else you do. The fact that the activity is a .java file, and then we have an interface that goes with that, and we set the context view. So if I go back to Android Studio and I actually look at an activity, here's a main activity. We know that we are extending from inheritance from either activity or app compact activity. It's from the inheritance line. We can also implement interfaces if we want, like a Java program. However, I don't ask you anything specific like that, but it's a regular old Java object. And we've got the methods in here. We can have variables. If there's anything asked, it's going to be more along the lines of object-oriented type of question, such as model view controller. But I don't ask you any. I mean, I'm going to give you some model view controller stuff towards the end of the class, but this is we have a separate view, and then we have a separate model or data model that for data, and then we have the controller, which are the adapters that work with them. But that's more of a final exam kind of content. So what can I tell you about the activity? Click listeners. We put click listeners on objects. Comes from view. We make, what have you learned about activity? So we extend something in the activity line. We can have variables. We have a callback method for the life cycle for the onCreate. This is required. We cannot create an activity without it. In the onCreate, we usually call the super. We have this thing called a bundle. It's a data type is a bundle, and it's called the saved instance state. In the last lecture or the one before, I showed you a stopwatch that's saved to the bundle. This is the temperature. So these questions might be related to the bundle, just as an example. So what I'm trying to say is it's not like just on activity, because someone's going to come back and say, you didn't ask me, this list doesn't include anything about what the bundle data type is or what the saved instance state is. That would fall under this category if I were to ask you a question like that. There's about 40 something questions, and you're going to get 30 of them. So there's a slight, every exam is going to be a little different. So there's a slight variance. All the questions are the same difficulty, but you'll get different variations of the same question. It's to prevent cheating. I also have 3 control questions where if you Google it, you're going to get the wrong answer, because I'm going to put the wrong answer that's on the internet as one of the multiple choice options. So I know, because there's a couple of things that are my pet peeves that I've been following and trying to fix over the years. One of them is actually on a Wikipedia site. But just there are students that will Google during the exam and they'll go, oh, well, that's what it is. Oh, there it is. That's option B. Okay. And then they'll select B. And it's completely wrong. So just like everything, I don't like the internet I like the internet, but I don't like the bad information on it. And now we have AI that's using bad information as well. So it's like, wow, it's a double whammy now. Anyway, so saved instance state is keeping track of all the temporary data that we'd normally have. Like if you opened up a C program and you went like integer I is equal to something or other, that would be saved in the bundle. If we had a bundle, it would saved instance state, which would be part of like if we had that in C, but we don't have that in C. We just have memories floating around, but we don't actually have that memory saved anywhere. So imagine in an Android app, you bring it up, right? You create integer I, you assign it a variable, and then the app goes to sleep. And then you bring up another program. It's like, what happened to the memory that was being used for that app? It's gone. It's being repurposed now for the new app that you've loaded up. So the only way to save the information is to put it in a saved instance state. And so that's why the onCreate takes that in as a parameter and then restores it. And then we load the super on instance state if we wanted to. Another thing that we do is we set the context view to the layout file, from r.layout. And then we assign variables. We use find view by ID, which is very similar. If you look at some of this stuff, it totally reminds me of the document object model. Document with ID or document by ID, or it's find view by ID, which is like similar. I don't know if you guys have heard of the document object model. It's what web browsers use to okay, this is off topic, but when you load up a page in a web browser, there's a hierarchy, an object-oriented hierarchy to it. And so you can, if you ever take a web development class, you can write to those objects and read information from those objects. You go document dot get element by ID, and the element is a checkbox or something. You need to see if it's checked or something. That's the same thing. Find view by ID. It's like nothing new, really. But yeah, so this concept of taking in the view components and assigning them to local variables. And here's your shared preferences. So if you use this one example to just look at it, saved switched button states before the exam, this is actually a good example because it's got everything in it. So yeah, we have shared preferences here. There's a little example of that. Setting an on-click listener. We have anonymous on-click listeners. We have an interface to on-click listeners. We can also create an object for the on-click listener. So look at the, and then you look at the exam and say, well, there's nothing in here that says anything about on-click listeners. That's because it falls into these other categories. That's why I'm going over this today, because if you just look at this, it's not enough information to complete everything. So review on-click listeners. And you can put an on-click listener on anything. You can put it on a text view. You can make anything clickable. And it's creating that event-driven behavior that's giving you the ability to, receive input from the user and process it. So more than just buttons, but yeah. I did not ask you any questions about gestures and no questions about touch. We just started with those. So, and I'm going to bring a real phone in eventually here and continue that lecture. So I just can't do it on the emulators. So let's see. We know there's 4 questions on the activity and the services life cycle. And questions are not necessarily identifying the methods, but the purpose of the life cycle. Yeah, basically the purpose of the life cycle callback methods, life cycle in action. I have 1 or 2, and I can't remember if they're probably not going to be selected on every exam. There's sort of like a word scenario where it says it's like more than one sentence. Most of the questions, like 90% of the questions, are like a single sentence or 2 sentences. I have like 5 of them in there that are like a paragraph, where it's going to give you a scenario to say, you want to build an app and your app's going to do blah, 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 and you want it to have blah, 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 blah. Which component would you select to store the data? A, B, C. Or which component would you select which view component would you select to hold the list of states or something? And so you could pick, maybe it says list view, recycler view, or list view or recycler view. I'm not going to have you switch between those 2. Or spinner, actually, both of those would work. Or a text view, or an edit text, or A and B. So you could select the logical answer. There's only about 5 of those questions, and I'm not sure they show up on every exam. I kind of have a problem with the way that the exam is actually auto-generated. It's not too smart, so it keeps picking the same questions. But hopefully you won't get the same question twice. I have had that happen. And if you do, just answer it twice the same way. Unless you think you want to take a guess. It's like two different answers. But that doesn't happen. They fixed that bug. That doesn't happen anymore. So, more questions on widgets and UI components. So if I go into the layout, let's just pick another layout here. As I mentioned before, these are widgets. When I say widgets and components, some people call them components. I mean the same thing, widgets and components. Components would be, I guess, would be more like a list view, a recycler view. So, and just because I'm mentioning list view and recycler view, I should probably mention, oh, there's no questions on fragments. Well, actually, I don't know if there's any questions on fragments, but let me get back to list. I'm going to go to that next. So the list view is, and the recycler view are pretty much the same component, except for one of them's newer than the other. The list view is the original. The recycler view is the newest one, the latest and greatest. Recycler view does garbage collection, where the list view does not. The recycler view has built-in functionality for the adapter, as we saw in the last lecture. It says recycler view dot adapter. Where the list view never had a built-in adapter that was associated. It was designed just for it. So the recycler view is a better component because of that adapter, actually. But you can use any adapter you want with the list view, but you can't with the recycler view. You have to use the recycler view adapter with the recycler view. So the list view is a little bit more flexible. The list view also takes up less memory. Because it's not, I don't know, maybe it's because it's not garbage collected. They felt, I guess, the recycler view could take up a ton of memory because we're just going to recycle it. Just going to clear it out and fix it up anyway, because it has memory management to it. So if you have a small list of items, if you get, just like 10 items or less or so, or 20 items or less, and it's just one piece of data, I'd stick it in a list view because it's easier to tear down, build up. And then you could just use a regular old base adapter or string adapter, something like that, array adapter. If you had a ton of data, like you had a database and you're going to do a query from a database and you got like 50 records coming back, and you have like multiple pieces of data for each one of those items that's in the list view or in the recycler view, I'd use a recycler view because of the garbage collection. And what it does is the recycler view will actually cache the components. So it can't hold, your Android app can't hold like 500 records from a database. It can't do it. It's just not enough memory. You're going to exceed the memory requirements. So in the recycler view, you're going to get part of the records cached for easier addition for scrolling and stuff. So it's definitely an improvement on the concept. But all you have to do is go to developer.android.com and type in list view and just look at it. Just read a few things on it, or recycler view, and you'll have all of the information I just gave you, plus a few more details. If I didn't go over it in class, it's not on the exam. So everything on the exam, I've actually told you in the class lectures already. So that's why you guys are going to ace it, because you guys come to class. So, or anyone who's watching on Zoom, I should say. As long as you're listening to the lectures, you're going to be all right. So when it comes to these widgets, there's a lot of widgets in here. Some of them we've used, actually. Some of them we haven't. If we haven't used it, if you haven't seen it in any of my examples, it's not on the exam. For example, video view. Never even used that one. That was actually kind of cool, and I didn't even know that one was in there still. I thought they took it out. So a calendar view. Some of these we will be using. Actually, the progress bar is coming up. Seek bars, rating bars. Lots of cool stuff in here. But for the most part, the common category, we've got the buttons, the image view, the recycler view. Noticing there's no list view in here. Scroll view, we've used that one. We got some text options. I mean, we got 15 million different types of text that we can do in here. Let's just be familiar with a text view. Because what's going to happen is you're going to see a question that's going to say, some common view components display text on the screen are A, text view, B, edit text. Well, actually, that's not a good answer. Something else from like a different language or something. There's a lot of things in there. Okay, now I'll give you guys a trick here. There's a lot of the answers that are actually swing and AWT components. It's to catch the people that know Java and they think they know Android, but they've never worked with it before. So they don't know that it's not called the same name as the swing and the Android. So don't fall for that one. So, and that's really what these questions are about, these guys here. These are the widgets and UI components. So, and so phone, and it's just basically different formatting for the text. The buttons, you guys have used image buttons, I think, probably. A chip group. I don't think I've ever used a chip or a chip group. And I don't even know what the chip looks like, actually. But we have radio groups, toggle buttons, switches. I'm actually going to show you a switch today. Layouts. Those are view components. I gave you a layout lecture. And again, layouts are not in the list. I don't see anything in here. Oh, we do layouts right underneath it. I did put it in. Okay, good. Down to the next category, layouts and more view components. So there's one in the course materials. I put it in a text file. It's called layouts.txt or something like that. It's previously up here. There's about four. Let's see, we have the linear, we have the relative, composite, table, the general ones. I'm not going to ask you anything about any of the obscure ones. In fact, we don't even have them in here. A frame layout, table layout. Actually, I don't even see constraint layout. You know, they took relative and linear out of here. Huh. Every time I download it, every time I put up a new version of Android, I see like totally like they're stripping stuff out. It's like, wow. I like the linear and I like the relative layout, but you can continue using them even though they're not in here. So yeah, that's unusual. We did look at the card view. We did look at the scroll view as well as the card view. In fact, I'm going to have a really cool card view example for you probably next week or the week after. So, and I was going to say we do have class, but we don't have class actually next week because I'm going to be out of town. Yeah, it's going to be the following week that you're going to see the cool card view. Let's just see, add view. I'm going to put pop-up ads in there. Map view. Oh, that's legacy. Oh, that's what they did. So they didn't take them out. They just moved the list view to a legacy category. Hint, hint, they're trying to get you not to use it anymore. Grid view, relative. There's my relative layout. Legacy. Yeah, if so, Google has a tendency to do that. It's like when they first come out with a feature like edge to edge, every single one of their templates now has edge to edge in it. It's like, that's annoying. It's like, I don't want to use the edge to edge. You know what edge to edge actually does? It takes the margin away. There's a little gutter that's on the sides, so the app doesn't go fully to the end of the screen. Makes it easier to read. So edge to edge takes the gutters away. So you get more screen surface that you can put stuff on. But if you put text, it goes right to the edge and you can't see the trailing characters. It depends on the phone. Yeah, because they have bezels and things that cover the edges. And then you like look and you can't read the screen because it's
going beyond.
Yeah, it goes beyond the physical. And so it takes the actual screen size and not the bezeled look.
The intended.
Yeah. Yeah, so I always take that out, but it's in every single one of their templates when I download it. It's ridiculous. Anyway, it's not a perfect system. All right, so those are those components, layouts and view components. We also have the resource folder in Android Studio. It gets turned into r.java that I was mentioning earlier. There's one question specifically about the resource folder. So in the you want to know, and it's probably related to the purpose of the resource folder. And in there, or it's part of like either the values subfolder that has the colors or the strings in it. We know that we can create an international application app by in multiple different languages by using the strings. Yeah, we know that um, we can put a bunch of images and video and stuff, content in the drawable folder. Now I'm tempted to put a video in my app. And so the video view, I didn't know that was in there actually. It was a beta for a while. It's brand new. So it's, I'm gonna try that one out. All right. Yeah, one question about that. One question about the concept of the intent. So don't go too overboard on this one. Again, this class exam schedule is a cumulative. I'm going to ask you questions on the final about implicit and explicit intents. That's a basic intent question. It's about the concept of the intent. You don't have to know what it means, actually. In fact, I can't even recite. And if you Google it, you're going to get 15 different answers in terms of what the definition of an intent is. And it might actually be one of my control questions. Because the internet's completely wrong on the concept in a lot of cases. And I shouldn't say that they're completely wrong. The problem here is the same problem I have with other things on the internet. Time goes by. Android's been out. I've been teaching Android development since 2000 something, 2001, 2002. So I know I'm dating myself right now. I've seen this kind of transform from, we didn't have Android Studio at the beginning. We took Eclipse and we installed plugins. Oh my God, you guys are lucky you didn't do that. And the emulators were bad. You had to actually use a real phone. You didn't have a good emulator. It's grown significantly. But back in the day, intents were significantly different back there. And so you go to a website and you don't know the age of the information. That it might be old, and it is old, but it might say 2026 on it. But they're talking about something that doesn't work like that anymore. Yeah, that's the problem. And it's not just with Android, it's with everything. And time changes. I mean, concepts change in time. So anyway, that's really why it's easy to find control questions that are yeah, maybe back 20 years ago that was the case, but not now. So, and actually there are some stuff now that you guys probably don't know that I haven't really told you about yet, is that you can actually create apps in C and C++ now on Android. I'm teaching the class for Java. I have to pick out a language, and Java is like the most common language being used. But yeah, if you don't like Java, you can actually use C and C++, or you can actually use HTML and CSS and JavaScript too. I'm going to show you that actually today. So you're not stuck to just Java. And if you don't like Java, Kotlin is actually a nice language too. So, but 20 years ago, it'll say apps are only made in Java. So anyway, and then I don't ask you questions about the languages either, so don't worry about that. 3 questions about the Android manifest. So let's take a look at the Android manifest. Android manifest, I have not given this guy enough credit. This guy is really powerful. And if you have a problem with the manifest, your app's probably not going to work. If you leave me out the manifest, you're not going to have a problem with that. So we have the launcher icon, the icon that sits on the desk on the screen. We have the name of it that's going to show up right underneath it. We have a theme that we can specify. Now, this one is not including all of the information that's possible. You have to have at a minimum a target API, but you can also do a minimum supported and a maximum supported. You can actually specify the API level that your app is going to support. And then lo and behold, you've got the activities, all of your activities, all of your services, all your broadcast receivers, all of that stuff is registered in the Android manifest. So an Android manifest keeps track of all of the components. And what it is I keep calling it a traffic cop, because if it's not in the manifest, it won't run. And some people actually figured this out with assignment number 1 when they manually created activity number 2 without using the menu options. And then they go, the screen just goes away. And it's, when you see the screen going away like that, flashing and going away, It's either a UI component that's broken or something missing from the manifest, by the way. So, but anyway, we have to put every single one of the components in here, including the activities. And then we have to specify which activity is the launcher activity, which one is going to start first. And there's actually two ways of doing that. The order of the activities. If whatever activity is first would be the natural launcher. However, in this particular example, this one's not the launcher. This one's the launcher. Why? Because we have it as Android intent category launcher. We've specified it as the launcher. So this is actually, it doesn't have to go first. But the first one, if I didn't put this line in, if I made this one look like that one, this one would go first. So outside of the application, we've seen it a couple of times. We have uses permissions that's put in here. So permissions for Bluetooth, the internet, the SMS, telephony services, anything that is accessible through the content provider uses a permissions. So the Android manifest uses permissions. If we don't put the permission in there, again, it's not going to work for us. We're going to it's going to fail terribly. What else we got? I'm not covering the backup stuff. Okay, going back to what I was saying before, in the earlier days, in the first, I'm surprised this hasn't been taken out. We had backups. It's like, why in the world would you want a backup of your app? It's kind of, I don't know, maybe it has a specific purpose. I just don't see it yet in modern day. And I never saw it back then either, but I don't know what the allow backup. It's like, I don't know, maybe I should go look at that, but it's been around for years and I've never used it personally in any of my app projects. So I don't know. I have used the themes and we are still back with the original style. We had styles before themes. So it's still using the at style, which is oddly close to style tags in CSS, the word style. So yeah, there's a lot of CSS, HTML web development. So if you're into this, you could probably also study web development and it would actually help your mobile app skills too. So very similar, actually, even the terminology is similar. So there's three questions about that Android manifest. You don't necessarily need to know anything about the format of it, like this stuff up here. It is an XML file. You don't have to know about the headers. I don't ask you that on any of them, actually, because it's just standard and it's put in for you automatically. We do have an application opening and closing tag. And everything about the application goes in there. So, and there is an intent filter that's in here. And we have a line here that says action name, Android intent.action main. So, and this is intent.category.launcher. If we take these guys out, this guy out here, and I made an intent to go from main activity to another activity, it would fail. Because the intent filter needs to be registered in the manager. And by registering it, you register it by adding it to the manifest file. And then when the app gets compiled, it looks at the manifest and then that quote unquote registration happens. They call it a registration. But yeah, this guy here is making those intents work. And this one here is making it the main launcher. So it's kind of a twofold. And it's kind of like why there's always a space in between because they actually are not together. This is an action, this is a category. So the tags are different. They're two different. They're not related to each other, but they look like they are because they're all inside of the intent filter. Intent filter is just filtering out what is allowed. So as a traffic cop means it's allowed to run. It's allowed to use an intent. It's allowed to be the main launcher versus this one up here who can't do anything. Now that exported, I have no idea why that's always in there. Yeah, I know. It's somebody always asks, and I knew a long time ago, and I think I read somewhere where it's going to be taken out So it's legacy. It's legacy. Let me go back to what I just said like in the beginning. From the beginning, this has been in there and it was used for something. And I can't remember what it was used for. But I did notice we have exported false and we have exported true. Odd. Odd and confusing, and don't worry about it. It's not part of this class. It is something that, yeah, legacy. That's the best way, best label I can put on it. We don't have any legacy components like we do in the widgets. We don't have a legacy category in the Android manifest, but if we did, that would go in there. So, all right, questions about the content of the midterm exam. Hopefully I've given you a lot to think about. I would just go through the PDFs and I would go through the subjects if you remember, or this is also being recorded, you can listen to it again. Just go through and make sure you know all those little items and you'll get an A on this exam, no problem. So there will also be a recorded lecture that goes over I'm doing that right now. I don't know where this came from then. I don't know why I wrote that, so. Okay, wow, it took a lot longer than I thought it would, so. Questions, comments, concerns? Nope. We're gonna stop this video. You have a question? No, you had that look like you did.
So I know you mentioned for intents.
Yeah.
Question one, intents in particular.
Yeah.
there's a Correct answer and there's a bunch of fake, like wrong answers.
Yeah. Well,
I'm trying to recall what the correct,
an intent.
yeah, like, is it just like, what is an intent? Is that?
So
like
an
something that's, like,
intent,
personal?
it's like it specifies an intention, which is why it's called intent. It's short for an intention. Your intention is from this app to go to that app over there.
Yes.
Or my intention is to do an action, to go to the camera and go into the take photo action.
Yes, deliberate.
Yeah. So it's a kind of like a pipe in Unix, kind of like, I'm gonna say a non-technical example, like a connection that you use when you intend to open up the photo library or the phone dialer. It's used a lot with the built-in components, but you can also use it like we did in assignment number 1 in your app to go from your components, for your components. You can use an intent to start a broadcast receiver, to start a service, to stop a service, to go from one activity to another activity, to bring data in from a database. But you'd use a query along with that. But yeah, it's meant to bring items together and connect as a connection mechanism. And it's basically your intention is to do something. So if you think about intent, just think about intentions. What are my intentions? Well, I want to open up that camera app and I want to take a picture with it. That's an intent. Don't have to worry about pending intents. We haven't really gone over those yet. I have more on intents to give you before this class is over. But there's pending intents and there's intent filters that haven't really covered yet. But the basic concept as done in assignment number 1, the intent is what you need. Yeah, and that's an explicit. Well, then now you know what the difference is then. That's the explicit category. When I explicitly state that main activity is going to open up another activity, that's explicit. Implicit is you don't really know what's out there.
There could be multiple.
There's like multiple actions out there. You want to specify, and you don't know how it's going to happen, but you want to go and take a picture. So you create an intent, which is in the implicit category, to tell the system to go fetch me that service. I don't know what the system does it for you.
No services layer.
Yeah.
So you're saying I'm making an intent
To go open up.
Pluck.
Yeah, and there's predefined, you're plucking, yeah, that's a good idea. You're plucking stuff out of a mystery box, a black box that you can't see, that has all this stuff in there, and then they give you these keywords, and you're going to use the keyword as a tag. And I showed you a whole list of this. Yep.
This.
Grab this, grab this. Yeah. It's in the intents lecture. If you go and look at the definitions, you'll see a clearer definition. But it's when you're not specifically opening up anything, but you're asking the system to give you something. And it could be the phone dialer or the SMS manager, or in fact, that's like 90% of all of the shared content on the phone is done through implicit intents.
Yeah,
The only thing that's done explicitly is when you use it in your app to call an activity or a service or a broadcast receiver or another component that's in your app. This implicit is outside of your app. It's out in the system. That's why you don't have any access to it. You have to go through the system to get access to it.
mentioned, right? You said like technically you could explicitly reach out and have the service, but that's very old fashioned.
Yeah. No, if you use, it is. That's how it used to be done. It's now streamlined.
Yeah.
So you don't have to do it that way. Yeah, there's a lot of examples out there that still do it the manual way. And it's just like, why would anyone do it that way? When they have a special libraries now from like, they're at least 10 years old actually at this point. But you go out on the internet, you still see that old crap out there. Yeah.
Right, this service or like, you don't need.
And then also in the old days, which gets a lot of students in trouble if you've run into this situation, it'll tell you, like you go to Stack Overflow or something and it'll tell you, open up the Gradle, you know, add something to your Gradle or change something. Never touch the Gradle files. That's outdated and old. The only thing that you do to the Gradle these days, and this is just general, has nothing to do with the midterm, by the way. The only thing that you're doing to the Gradle these days is adding a dependency. You don't need to change any. If you start messing with this stuff up here, the SDK, the target, the version number, all this stuff up here, you're going to mess up your app that's not going to compile. But that's what you had to do before the manifest became, was able to handle all that stuff. But they still left it. So parts of the Android system are a little duplicated, like some things are duplicated. Like here we have target, we have compiled SDK, we have a target SDK. And then over here in the manifest, we have a target API. It's like that one's 31. The other one I think was 34 or something. It's like, okay. But this isn't really being used anymore. Gradle uses it, but and when you set up the app originally, I specified a target of 28.
Yes.
And that is not 28. So that doesn't even match my project configuration. Which tells me it's in there, it's left in there, just leave it alone, don't touch it.
Yeah.
Even if you make a change to it, it's not going to change anything. It's not actually even being used. It's like leftover, like those other things that are left over. But dependencies are being used. So dependencies, and that's why this file still exists, I believe.
Yes.
But yeah, I'm hoping in the next couple more releases, because this is already stripped out. This is completely stripped out. If you take a look at Android Studio from like about 5 years ago, there's like twice as much content in this file. And then you go online and you go to Stack Overflow to solve a problem, and you go, and then you go and I don't have that line. It's because it's outdated and what you're looking at. And then it says 2026 on the response, but they're like, don't know what they're talking about. So anyway, don't follow Stack Overflow. That's not one of my favorites, of course. Okay, so I'm going to stop this because I'm running out of time. And oh, I only have 10 minutes. You know what? I can recycle the video from yesterday. I'm going to stop this recording now.